Welcome to Skytalkers. Here are your hosts, Charlotte and Caitlin.
Hello and welcome to Skytalkers. I'm your host, Charlotte.
Hey everyone, I'm your other host, Caitlin, and welcome to our Acolyte coverage. It's here. It's finally here. We're covering the Acolyte, episodes 1 and 2, the premiere that just came out yesterday, June 4th. I've been so ready to talk about this show.
I know, it's actually insane.
Mm-hmm.
What can I say about the Acolyte up top here? Just that I am just so freaking thrilled that we're here talking about it. I feel like this has been my most anticipated project since it was announced. I am a big Leslye Headland fan. I loved Russian Doll, and I felt like this had the potential to be something really special. And boy, did it deliver.
Mm-hmm.
I've been thinking about us recording this episode for a really long time. And yeah, I just feel like it's really great. There's so much to dig into. It's almost a little overwhelmingly so because so I assume that in the 8 episodes in which we will cover of the Acolyte, we will try to cover all of it. But I feel like there's so many theories that I just keep bouncing around my head, half-fledged, half-fulfilled. I don't know. I just feel like there's a lot to talk about. So I'm really, really thrilled to be here.
There's definitely going to be some wild Skytalkers speculation, which I'm excited to really dig into throughout the rest of the Acolyte. It's already started. Charlotte and I were texting last night while we were watching it, and new theories were flying. Could not keep up. Voice memos were going back and forth, texting.
Yeah.
It was a lot.
Yeah, flying. Absolutely flying. I'm so thrilled. You probably know if you follow us on social media, but we did go to the Acolyte premiere like a week and a half ago at this point. It was awesome. We also watched the first 2 episodes there. And if you haven't checked it out already, we did get to participate in a roundtable interview with the showrunner, Leslye Headland. And that is on the feed right now. You can go back and listen to that. And that was crazy. And because of that, we did get screeners for the Acolyte. And so we have seen 4 episodes, which is half the season, which actually kind of makes me a little sad.
I know, right? The thing is, though, I mean, you guys have known we've had screeners before, so we do try to keep our speculation in check when that happens to us. But I will caveat that by saying the way that the screeners worked out this go around for the first 4 episodes is that the first 4 episodes expired at 9 a.m. the night after the premiere. And we didn't watch episodes 3 and 4 before the premiere. You know what I mean? And so we watched episodes 1 and 2 at the premiere, and then we went and ate and had drinks with friends. And then we came back to the hotel at like 2 a.m. and watched episodes 3 and 4 with our eyes peeled open. And I'm going to be honest, we dozed a little bit in them.
But it's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay that we it's forgivable. It's like we had to watch them because we had them, and how could we not? But the memory is not really serving. So
like I said, it's a little different than our other screener experiences when we have had them like more episodes ahead of time. But that being said, still, of course, you guys know we will not be talking about what is coming in episodes 3 and 4, or really speculating about it either. We will say they're very good. If you liked episodes 1 and 2, you're going to have a good time with 3 and 4 as well. And I imagine the rest of the series too. But yeah, they expired that morning at 9 a.m. So we watched them, yes, but did we internalize them? No. Just due to the nature of the day. But one of the things that I was so looking forward to for the show actually premiering is that we finally got the episode titles, which they don't give you the episode titles in the screeners. And you guys know how we feel about episode titles. We love to talk about them. And so that was one of the things I was most excited for, was to finally find out what these freaking episodes were called, what they were titled. And they fully delivered.
The duality of it all, the slashing, it's just insane. I feel like we'll have a lot to say. Are we going to ever get one of these episodes being just one title? Maybe if May and Osha somehow join forces. There's a lot there. It's really bringing me back to the days of speculation about Rey and Kylo, just the duality the dyad of it all. It's just really insane. I'm very, very thrilled. I also think that we should introduce ourselves a little bit for people who are listening for the first time, given the fact it's a new series. We do this at the start of every new series, but I'm Charlotte, big Star Wars fan. That's Caitlin, also big Star Wars fan. Yeah. And we're really excited that you're here. We love Star Wars and we love breaking it down in a very analytical way and also speculating for the future and how it all fits in to the greater Star Wars universe. So if you're new, we're really happy you're here. And yeah, stay tuned for more weekly episodes about The Acolyte.
Yeah, we're really excited to be covering this show. We've been podcasting about Star Wars since 2017. So it's been a minute and we've covered every show that's come out.
Every show.
So if this is your first time in Star Wars or you're new to Star Wars podcasts but have been in the Star Wars world for a long time, we've got a lot of coverage about a lot of Star Wars. So get ready, grab a snack. Let's go. Let's talk about The Acolyte.
Let's go. Okay. So what did we both think?
I think it's pretty obvious. We both really liked it.
Loved. Okay, great. We got that out of the way. Let's start with episode 1 called Lost and Found. Aired June 4th, written by Leslye Headland and directed by Leslye Headland.
And created by Leslye Headland and produced as well. The credits rolling on episode 1, I was hollering on my couch.
Hooting and
hollering. I was like, yes, again, another one. Leslye, one more time. Let's go. It was just
It's so just great. Been such a journey, I think.
Great.
To have a woman showrunner and a woman director and a woman writer, like what? It's so crazy. Yeah. So it's not our first in Star Wars. I need to be very clear about that, but damn, it feels really good that it is, I don't know, that we're here, that we've arrived, and the show is being showrun by her. And I'm very thrilled. I'm done saying excited. I've said it a lot already in the 7 minutes we've been podcasting, but yeah, the credits were a thrill. And man, there were a lot of women in those credits. It just made me very happy.
Yeah, very happy. And the caliber of the show is already so great. So it's just like, wow, let's keep adding more women behind the camera and in front of the camera. Like, let's just keep this train going.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So for people who are new, where are we? We used to ask this question in some of our other TV show recaps, but the question is, what's the state of the galaxy right now? Where are we? Rough sketch in the timeline. What's going on in the galaxy far, far away as we come into The Acolyte?
So it's 100 years before The Phantom Menace. This is very much a prequel to The Phantom Menace in a lot of ways, but I really think that it is such a good entry point for anyone, given the fact that this is the first piece of visual media that Star Wars has done that is the very first in the timeline, right? Mm-hmm. So you don't really need to know much. It's really nice for people like you and me who've read the High Republic series, which is a book series, a comic series, a huge publishing initiative that really established this new era called the High Republic because of the gold robes and things like that. That's how you clue in that it's the High Republic. It's very
the Jedi are so well dressed in this
era. They're super well dressed and they're everywhere. Yeah. I think it was really cool to see almost immediately just the reminder that I think was established in the High Republic or Master and Apprentice, which is a Claudia Gray novel, very good, that there's a Jedi who are stationed on a ton of planets. And when we hear May in the very beginning ask, "Where's your Jedi?" it just reminded me that in publishing, we really established that the Jedi are out there. They're not just at the temple. They're stationed on planets for years at end, and they're protectors of peace, right?
Yeah, they're like sheriffs.
So, yeah, they are kind of like sheriffs, but they're a little different than that, right? Because they have mystical powers, and
I think, a little different,
a little different. And I think it is really interesting in this era because something we have talked about on the show is that we're in an era, the High Republic, of little to no Sith to Jedi tension, right? There's the Jedi at their height. But I think the show is going to show or begin the downfall that we get to for the prequels, which the prequel movies are all about the downfall of the Republic, right? So how do we get to the point where the Jedi are so
lost,
flawed,
blinded,
blinded by the dark side. They can't see anything.
Yeah.
So I think it's an interesting point because something I've seen as a criticism of the show already is like there is perhaps a lack of tension because we already have that piece in the prequels of like, we already know where this ends, right? And we have already established that Ki-Adi-Mundi says the Sith have been extinct for over a millennia. I feel like the show isn't going to decanonize that statement. But at the same time, I feel like the show's going to push at that a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see where it's going to go. I don't think that's a negative. I think where we're at right now is I think there's going to be a lot of philosophical questions being thrown around about the role of the Jedi and where we're headed to get to the point where the Jedi don't want to accept a little boy like Anakin, who is clearly the chosen one, right, to be trained just because he's too old. So we already are starting there sort of with Osha even being trained as a Jedi. And they said that she was, quote unquote, too old too, and she left. So it's fun to make these comparisons, but in terms of the timeline, yes, we're 100 years ahead of the Phantom Menace. It is a time of peace, yet we do have the Trade Federation, which was interesting. But they've always hated the Jedi, which I think is funny. But they're just like bopping around, it feels like.
Yeah, I think, if you're unfamiliar with the High Republic, like Charlotte said, it's a huge publishing initiative that started a couple years ago. And it's like different phases. It takes place way before any of the movies. And there's so many Jedi in the galaxy, which is what we're seeing here in the Acolyte as well. And there's this really strong connection between the Jedi and the government, which is a really big thread that continues to be woven about the Jedi and politics. They even talk about it in this episode. I think it's something that we'll be continuing to track throughout the Acolyte and something that is a huge component of the High Republic as well. But like Charlotte said, in the High Republic era, the conflict for the Jedi is not with any Sith. It's a really interesting facet to the High Republic series in that the Jedi are really kind of being challenged in a really big way by non-Force users, which is really surprising. So, that's kind of the setup for the High Republic. And then we come into the Acolyte and it, we still, like Charlotte was mentioning with Ki-Adi-Mundi and this statement about the Sith being dead for millennia. But clearly we have May here who is being trained by someone called the Master. You know what I mean? So what is all of this going to mean for the Jedi as a whole, where they are politically and where they are what's the right word? Like publicly to the rest of the galaxy. I think that's something that Star Wars has kind of toyed with here and there throughout the past couple of years about the public perception of the Jedi. And we see comments and stuff about the general public and how they feel about the Jedi. But I kind of wonder if we might see some more shades of that throughout the rest of the Acolyte, because I think that's a really interesting component to see how the Jedi's reputation, how their legacy, even once we get into the original trilogy and there are no Jedi, and even further into the sequel trilogy when you have characters like Rey saying, "Oh, I thought they were a myth," or something like that, that they didn't even exist. So I'm really, like you said, I think there's going to be a lot of philosophical questions about the Jedi and how they operate, but I think we're also going to get a lot of that political component about how they operate in the galaxy and their relationship to politics and things like that. All wrapped up in this murder mystery with these Jedi Masters who May has decided is her mission to go out and kill. Anyway, I'm very excited.
Me too.
Let's start at the prologue. This is something we also love to talk about with new shows. Star Wars is obviously very known for the crawl before each of the films, but all of the TV shows, not all of them, but a lot of them have taken kind of different spins on if there is a prologue, a crawl, something like that. And it's always fun to kind of see these differences. And I really liked what the Acolyte did in this first episode with this this narrative that kind of appears on screen. Very similar, I would say, to Solo. That's probably the one that it's closest to. Still a little bit different. But what the prologue says here is 100 years before the rise of the Empire, it is a time of peace. The Jedi Order and the Galactic Republic have prospered for centuries without war. And I think that's important. Again, the Jedi Order and the Galactic Republic, the peacekeepers and the politicians, they're always together.
Yeah, in one sentence together as a conjunction.
Exactly. It goes on to say, but in the dark corners of the galaxy, a powerful few learn the Force in secret. Okay, we're not calling them Sith. They're a powerful few. And then the last part is one of them, a lone assassin, risks discovery to seek revenge. And that word revenge, of course, pulls us into the title of episode 2, which we will, don't worry, we will be talking about the titles more in depth. But I think this was a really ominous start, and I thought a great short synopsis about where we were headed, and honestly the whole setup. An assassin is seeking revenge. All right, and then slowly throughout these 2 episodes, who is May seeking revenge on? The Jedi. I thought it was
I think I agree that it is May. Okay.
well, we'll talk
in
about
this sentence.
Yeah.
But is it?
I know.
I mean,
that's getting so ahead of ourselves.
I know.
Charlotte.
I know. Basically, well, I just want to lay the scene because I feel like this is going to come up a lot. The Acolyte is a thriller. It's a mystery, right? And I think there is something that needs to be said about how
Say it.
I think there's a question though about, is the Acolyte a space whodunit? Is it a thriller? Like I think we need to be aware of the whole concept of red herrings and who are we supposed to trust. Caitlin and I have now seen each episode of these 3 separate times, and each time we come away with a different, oh, that's kind of weird in the narrative. Oh, that's super weird that they said that. I wonder if that's a clue for something later that's going to come up. If you are also familiar with Leslye Headland's show Russian Doll, and she did reference this in our roundtable interview, basically Russian Doll operates, the narrative operates as like, it's circular. It's like Groundhog Day, basically. Every single episode is the same. And you get to the heart of the story by the very end. And that is sort of obviously the structure of a mystery, right? You're just discovering more and more evidence for the audience. And then by the end of it, you collect all those pieces of evidence, put it all together, and it should make sense, right? And I think that's the same thing that we're experiencing here in the Acolyte. So we I don't know, I just feel like we're supposed to pick up on a lot of different pieces of clues. And then there's also the aspect of the fact that there's potentially a double narratives happening, which is a hallmark of a whodunit, which is we have one narrative happening, and then later it is revealed that actually there's another narrative right underneath like right before our very eyes that we were not paying attention to because we were focused on the primary narrative. So how is that going to feel when something that is revealed potentially in episodes like 6 or 7 towards the end of the series, how are we going to look back on these episodes, Lost and Found and Revenge/Justice, a little differently? And so by watching these 3 times, right, it's like, oh, that feels like potentially a red herring. Oh, that's kind of suspicious. Don't really know what to think about that. And so when we read the prologue again, I'm like,
yeah,
could it be referring to someone else? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Leslye has also mentioned about this show. I can't remember if it was, one of the answers to the questions from our roundtable or from a different interview we've read about from her. But before the show came out about Rashomon and about this idea of different perspectives on one story. And I think that's what you were saying. And this is a big part of The Last Jedi as well, with everything that happens with Ben Solo when he was at the Jedi Temple with Luke Skywalker, right? Everyone's different perspectives on the story and what actually happened depended on who was telling you the story, right? So I think that's your point here of like, we're hearing one narrative right now, but what are the other narratives? What are the other perspectives that we're going to be seeing to get us to the true story of what happened? In these episodes, we have established that there was a fire on Brendok where May and Osha come from. And according to Sol and according to Osha, May started the fire and all of May and Osha's family, their mothers died. Everyone in their village was burned, and May died as well. Of course, we know by the end of episode 2 that May has also thought that Osha died this whole time, allegedly. And they see each other for the first time in supposedly, 16 years it's been, I think, when that happened. Something like that. So I think this is something we need to be keeping in mind. And I think this does bring us into the discussion of the titles, actually, because when Charlotte and I were talking about episode 1 title last night, Lost and Found, I said, who is lost and who is found? Because by the end of episode 2, May and Osha were both lost to each other, and they were both found to each other because they both thought the other was dead, lost, gone. So if lost and found, if those adjectives, descriptors can be tied to both Osha and May, is that the same for revenge and justice in episode 2? And I think that is interesting in our conversation about who's the assassin, because Osha is the one who says she wants to she deserves justice, right? When she's talking to Soul, because she blames May for the loss of her family. And Soul is the one who says what you're seeking is revenge. And that duality between both Osha and May seeking revenge, seeking justice. Is Osha seeking revenge just against May? Justice, revenge against May? Or is it something bigger? And similar for May, is May seeking revenge against the Jedi? Or is she seeking justice for perhaps her perspective of what happened in the fire? You know, I think these titles are so great. And I wonder if we'll continue this pattern of the duality of the titles throughout the rest of the series, because in Ahsoka, we had a pattern in the first 2 episodes in the episode titles, and then they dropped that pattern, and I was very upset about it. I was very sad. So I'm trying not to hold on too tightly, but I think these are so great because
I think they're sticking. I think Leslye, that's my vote.
I think Leslye will give this to me. I think she will give me a pattern. But you had a really good point when we were talking about it last night. You were like, you know, if both of these words seem like a little bit of opposites, but also kind of the same, or they go together, like lost and found, revenge and justice, and if they're meant to describe each of the May and Osha, perhaps, then maybe at one point they do become one. And we hear that little rhyme from May when,
oh my God, let's read it.
Yeah, she says, "You're in the vision of May and Osha," or Osha. I guess what we assume right now is just Osha's vision when she crashes on that planet. And May says, "You're with me, I'm with you, always one, but born as two. As above sits the stars and below lies the sea, I give you you and you give me me." So always one, but born as two. So will the titles eventually merge into one word to describe them both by the end?
Yes. Whew. That's the goal.
I'm done. That's all I got.
And the episode is over. Okay.
Anyway, so the point of that, to summarize, is I think that Charlotte and I on this last viewing actually started noticing a lot of holes in Osha's story. And, you know, if we're thinking about murder mysteries, whodunit, red herrings, where are some opportunities to see doubt? And I think we saw a lot more of that in Osha's story this viewing than we did the first few times we watched The Acolyte.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think the episode is quite straightforward about it is May who is doing the killing, right? But then the question becomes, is Osha actually aware of May? Is May aware of Osha? Are they working together and just sort of lying to our faces? Do we have an unreliable narrator in Osha? I don't know if we can even call her a narrator, but I do think we're focused on her story as like the good one, right? And I don't even know if that's really fair. I think it's interesting that Osha it did not go out with the rest of her crew the night of the murder. She really does not have an alibi besides the fact that she was on the ship. That said, the differentiator between May and Osha is that May has this tattoo on her head, but then Osha also has this like suspicious tattoo on her arm that she says is from a drunken night out. Is it from a drunken night out? It feels like it's not, because it feels very specific, and that scene felt really weird in episode 2. Especially on rewatch, I was like, something is up with this.
It felt like a lot of time to spend talking about a tattoo.
Yeah. And I mean, I also think that the symbol that's on her is very like nondescript. We don't really know what it means, but I do think it means something. It's like, it feels like a brand in a lot of ways. So I don't really know what to think about that. But I guess the point is I just feel like there's a lot of little pieces that I'm like, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. However, there are things that do make sense, right? Like Osha was not the one to kill Torben. She was not the one to kill Indara,
Yeah.
right? Unless somehow they switch places and they're just like different people. I don't know how that
So
could be
much.
possible, but like, and maybe we'll get explained that. I don't know, right?
Well,
And
Vernestra does say that. She's like, it's obviously not Osha because Osha's with you and this thing
yeah,
happened with Torben. And
but maybe they switch
he can't be
places.
in 2
I don't
places at
know.
once, and it's like a call out and it's, oh, well, maybe they can actually be in 2 places at once. I
Well,
don't
people can be in 2 places in once because we've already seen that with Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi.
and we've seen a force bond with our other dyad.
Yeah.
I don't know if Osha and May are
Yeah,
dyad, but
are they dyads? I don't know.
I don't know.
Kind of feels like it.
Yeah,
but we'll see.
if you don't know, the term dyad refers to the characters Rey and Ben Solo, Kylo Ren in the sequel trilogy, and it was that title was given to them in episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. And basically it's this descriptor for how they are connected in the Force. They balance each other. They represent 2 halves of a whole, basically, in the Force. And by the end of The Rise of Skywalker, Rey and Ben Ben is able to go to where Rey is through the Force physically. So there's precedent for that. And Luke Skywalker also, he doesn't transport himself physically, but he transports himself visually through the Force to other places in The Last Jedi. So there's precedent for this kind of thing. It's just going to be interesting to see how Osha and May fit into it. If they do, there could be, like, we're kind of nailing down on Osha here as a red herring because that's what we took away from our last viewing last
Yeah,
night.
and I want to make sure that it's not I'm not trying to like target her. I just am in the way that mystery works. I think everyone is potentially suspicious.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think I'm obsessed with Master Soul. Like he's the best, but
I trust him. I'll say that. I trust him.
I do too, but I just think it's just the way that a mystery works is like maybe we don't, because
you gotta look at everyone.
We got especially the Jedi who, like, we hear Master Torben say, we thought we were doing the right thing. Like Soul was a part of that. So maybe he's also guilty of something. I don't know. And how will I think about him differently again later? I don't know. So
I think we will. I think that's the point of this with the Jedi specifically, is we will view them differently by the end of it, or perhaps they will view themselves differently.
Yeah.
And the way that they have conducted themselves in the past and now in the present as well in the show. Anyway, we of course we've gotten ahead of ourselves with
it's okay.
some speculation.
It's fine.
The last thing I'll add about our question marks, our clues about Osha right now, I guess, in her past, is when Yord, which don't worry, we will talk about our reactions to these characters. When Yord and his Padawan come to arrest Osha on the Trade Federation ship, and they're talking, quote unquote, catching up in Osha's bunk. And Osha is asking why, what motive would I have to kill Indara? Could I even do it? She's a master. I haven't trained for 6 years or whatever. And the Padawan says, Indara advised the council to end your training, or Yord says this. Yord says, Indara advised the council to end your training when you, and then he's cut off. And Osha says, leaving the Jedi was the hardest thing I ever did. It was my decision and my decision alone. But Yord is cut off from saying, like, what happened for Indara to go to the council after Osha has already been training as a Jedi Padawan and say, maybe she shouldn't be a Jedi anymore.
Yeah.
And Osha doesn't let him finish the sentence. So I think that's a little interesting that we don't really hear what happened. Again, our question mark when we're building our sticky notes, about Whodunit and where everyone is and what their version of the story is. I think that's one of our sticky notes on Osha right now.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to say one more thing about Osha, is that when we talked to Leslye Headland, our question for her was about what inspired her about the episode The Wrong Jedi in the Clone Wars, and that whole arc about Ahsoka leaving the Jedi Order. Spoiler alert if you don't know. Sorry about that. But basically, Leslye was talking about how she was inspired by the fact that someone could leave the Jedi Order. But if I want to think about Osha and Ahsoka being similar characters, like how similar are we talking about? Because could Osha leaving or being forced out of the Jedi Order because she did something, as is sort of alluded here by Yord, Could this be an alternate situation that we see from like our understanding of Ahsoka's situation, which is that she was wrongly framed
For murder.
right? For murder, yeah. So Ahsoka, just to recap, Ahsoka was wrongly framed for murder for the of a Jedi and like bombing the Jedi Temple. And the fact that the Jedi did not stand by her during her trial made her feel like she was not welcome in the Jedi anymore, and she left the Jedi Order. Okay? So if Leslye was inspired by that specific situation, even when it was found out that Ahsoka did not do it, what if with Osha actually did do it and left on her own accord versus being forced out by some sort of trial.
Leaving before she got caught, maybe.
Yes. So I don't know if Star Wars would tell the same story. It's not unlike them to do that, but I do think it's worth maybe looking at maybe this is a little different than Ahsoka leaving the Jedi Order and that whole situation. And in our interview with Leslye, she comments that it was like the first time she ever really considered that someone could do that.
Could leave.
And that could leave. Yes. And so what does that even mean, I guess? And what are we going to try? What is she trying to say about Osha, quote unquote, leaving the Jedi Order, especially when Osha is very clear in both of these two episodes that she left on her own accord? How true is that? Who knows?
Yeah.
It's just a flag.
There's still a lot of holes or just pieces that we don't know yet in Osha's
Yeah,
story.
of course.
And, later one of her conversations with Master Soul talks about this idea of grief and letting go and absolution, which we're going to talk about that in episode 2. But Soul in the moment, he is kind of lamenting or talking about how he still kind of blames himself for what happened on Brendok, Osha and May's home planet. And Osha says, I've forgiven you for that a long time ago, and I've told you that. And Soul says, yes, and I've made peace with it for the most part. And Osha makes this comment of, yeah, it's a lesson you tried to teach me and one I could never learn. I think that's also kind of a bit ominous about what is the grief, what is the anger that Osha couldn't let go of surrounding what happened on Brendok. I think we see a lot of anger from her pointed at May in these episodes. Her conversation that we've already talked a little bit about with Soul at the very end about, she wants justice against May, and Soul says that's revenge, and I don't want you to do that. And Osha has a great line in there of, hold on, let me flip to it. Osha says, you are not my master. I do not need your permission to go out there and confront her. I deserve justice. And I think that point of I am no Jedi of her, which is a line from Ahsoka as well. Also in a conversation, Ahsoka says that also when her former master is talking to her about revenge. That's very interesting. Just thought of that.
Mm-hmm.
So later, Ahsoka has a confrontation with Darth Vader, many years later after she has left the Jedi Order. And she basically says that she's going to get revenge on Darth Vader for destroying Anakin Skywalker, essentially. And Darth Vader says, revenge is not the Jedi way. And Ahsoka says, I am no Jedi. And that's very, very kind of similar to this conversation as well, now that we're talking about it. We talked about this too, this Ahsoka parallel in the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, right? There's a great parallel between those scenes as well. And I think we have to be paying attention when these creators are very clearly drawing lines, because the scene where Soul first meets back up again with Osha is a direct copy, replica version of Ahsoka when she's being hunted for the murder that she didn't commit. And her master Anakin comes up to her and says, I believe you. We're going to figure this out. I'm your master. I'm here for you. And Ahsoka chooses to jump off the cliff, essentially, and go on her own. Whereas here we see the other alternate version of it, of Osha ends up going with Soul after he says, I believe you. I got you. Let's go. And so to your point that you said like 10 minutes ago, if Ahsoka was innocent in that timeline, in that story, when she left her master to prove her own innocence on her own, is there a world where it is the opposite here, where Osha is actually guilty for something and she goes with Soul, with her old master in this version, in this type of story? I don't know. I'm very intrigued. I am enjoying this conversation. It's so much to think about. You know what I mean? And we're still in the beginning and what could happen.
Yeah, it is a lot to think about. And I also am very sus of Qimir and everything regarding that. So, but we should dive into some of our favorite moments and specifics from episode 1. So let's talk through the fact that, let's talk through the martial arts in the show, which I feel like are really, really cool. And I love the way everything is choreographed. I wasn't expecting to love it this much, but I really kind of feel like we're back in a really great action-oriented show. I don't know. I'm loving it.
Yeah, I think the martial arts looks so smooth, so slick, so clean. And I know this is a big part of Leslie's goal for this show has been the martial arts, the fighting style of it. I thought the fight in episode 1 between Indara and May was so cool. Number 1, a noodle shop. A noodle shop. It's so great. The little Ferris wheel of noodles in the back.
It's so good.
And they
good.
did a lot of promo material in this set, and the little noodle Ferris wheel is just in the back, eternally circling with noodles, never ending noodle bowls. So great.
Like, give me some.
Right. But their fight was so cool, and them going up on the different levels, the use of the knives, and to see another version of this fight in episode 2 between Sol and May as well, again with the use of the knives, I thought was really great. And I thought it was so clever how May got the upper hand on Indara, honestly, at the end when she has the multiple knives and distracts Indara by targeting the barkeep, and then, ends up stabbing her with the other knife. I was really shocked when that happened. And of course,
Me too.
the way that Indara got pulled into the fight was because May was putting, citizens at risk, because May comes in, fight me, what did she say? Attack me with all your strength. And Indara is like, no, babe, I'm not doing that.
We do not do that.
Well, she says, Jedi do not attack the unarmed. And May says, yes, you do. Again, what an interesting phrase. Why is that in May's vocabulary, description, understanding of the Jedi, right? Because that's not who we are. And we see both Indara and Sol go to great lengths to not pull their weapon. This fight with Indara in the first episode, she is, she's not even making physical contact with May for a big portion of it. She's avoiding that contact, which we saw in Tales of the Empire that came out earlier in May, not too long ago, May 4th, that Barriss Offee fought in that manner as well, which we talked a lot about actually in our discussion of Tales of the Empire, this avoidant fight style almost, which ironically, Barriss Offee also has a really big role to play in Ahsoka Leaves and The Wrong Jedi. So
you mean the role?
Yeah. Well, yes, the role. She's spoiler. Barriss is the one that frames Ahsoka for murder in those episodes. So anyway, interesting. So many parallels.
Well, I feel like we're moving to this way of showing the Jedi as advanced fighters that don't need to use the lightsaber that much.
Yeah,
it's cool.
No, I think it's very cool, and I like how at the end of that fight, May doesn't take Indara's lightsaber. A character like Grievous, General Grievous from Revenge of the Sith, collects the lightsabers of all of the Jedi that he's killed like trophies. But it's not about that for May. And we see her leave the lightsaber at the end. I also think you can tell Amandla has done such an incredible job so far in this show. The emotion on her face when May does finally kill Indara, you can tell it's personal. It's not just a mission for her from the master, whoever that is. It's personal for her, and I think you really see that displayed on her face when it finally happens. And when Indara takes down her mask, she recognizes who May is, and I think she recognizes that it's May and not Osha. If I'm gonna
interesting. I didn't catch that, but I do think that's potentially true. Yeah, of course, because she shows her tattoo, right? So that on the head.
But then in episode 2, Torben also says to May, I've been waiting for you. And to me, again, it's like he's been waiting for May, not Osha.
Yeah, what is up with that? There's a lot of unanswered questions. Okay, so just kind of fast forwarding a little bit, the Nemoidians look awesome in the Trade Federation ship. The voices, great. Everything is so good about the creature designs in the show. I'm very wowed.
They look so
loving it. They really, the budget really went to a lot of the creature designs, and I'm here for it. The costumes, the creature design, the practical effect type look. I feel like we are reaching levels of sequel trilogy alien look.
Well, Neil Scanlan, he is the best.
Goat.
Yeah, I didn't want to say goat.
No, he's the goat.
He's the goat. I was trying to think of another way to describe Neil Scanlan besides the goat, but he is the goat of creature design, and it's been a minute since he's been the lead creature designer, creator for Star Wars in this way. So you can tell how the difference and just how incredible they are. The fact that you and I are talking about the creatures, I think, is enough to say.
I feel like we would say that, but like, let's be real. The past 2 years, we've really dove deep into the little weirdos.
We have, But the barkeep and his baby,
with the little baby,
I don't know what that creature is, but I think he might be my new favorite.
I think he's a newbie, but he's the baby. It was like, oh, and also in the theater, everyone was like, oh.
And his doll, the baby's doll, is the same type of creature species that they are. They were just so cute, and oh my gosh! And then the creature on the ship, the prison, when they're doing the prison break, who can detach part of his head and it becomes a tentacle, and he like decapitates the robot, the droid. That shook me to my core.
I loved the prison break scene. I thought that was great. I really liked the parasite on the guy's face. I had thought the second time I was watching it, I heard the line that parasite thing on his face like does something to his mind, and then when it was removed, right, it like went into the air ducts of the ship that Osha was then stuck on, right?
Yeah,
and then shortly after that, Osha has the vision of young May. It's amazing vision, very much reminiscent of The Force Awakens, even down to the snow, right? I loved that. I really did. If you know anything about Caitlin and I, we love a weird vision. We love weird Force stuff, and that really hit. Yeah. But I really thought, oh, maybe she got sort of infected by that parasite or something. And maybe she did. I don't know. Maybe that was a part of the original script and it just changed. But I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
But then also, I guess she's Force sensitive. So it's like the Force calling back to her. And clearly she hasn't used the Force in a while. If I'm taking the story at face value, which I am at this point, it's sort of, it's clear that she has cut herself off from the Force a la Luke Skywalker after leaving the Jedi.
Has she cut herself off, or has it left
just
her?
Weakened?
Yeah.
I don't know.
There's a difference.
Yeah, I think it probably weakened because I do think she tried to use it at that one point when she was reaching for,
Pip.
I don't know, something to help. Yeah, Pip. And then something to help her get out of that jail cell. So I'm sure it's maybe a little bit of both. Like maybe she initially cut herself off from the Force and then just kind of forgot about that.
She just forgot.
I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. And I think new Star Wars these days really does hammer home that the Force is something that you have to hone. If everyone has the Force, then you really have to work at it. That training is very important, and proper training yields like solid results, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of clear here.
I think it's funny that you were like, I'm taking the story at face value right now, even though we just spent the last, 30 minutes.
Well, I think when I was just analyzing that specific piece,
now I know
there's a lot of
funny.
I know, that's why I had to specify. At that point, I'm taking the story at face value.
This is not wild speculation. This is what was given to us, what was shown.
I think it's extremely cool, just shifting then to Coruscant, that we're seeing a way older Coruscant. We're seeing less buildings than we do in the prequels. The Jedi Temple,
Coruscant, really.
Yeah, looks like lower. everything just looks a little different because it's not as built up as the Coruscant that we see in the prequels. And I just think that passage of time and that sort of visual signaling is really cool.
Yeah, Coruscant is definitely a really fun planet to watch through the years because we go back to it. And if you're new, Coruscant is the capital of the galaxy. So it's entirely buildings. I think what is it? In the High Republic, right, they talk about Monument Plaza on Coruscant, which is where you can see the last little bit of the natural planet of the top of a mountain or something like that. I can't remember the
because
details.
it's just built up and up and up.
Yeah,
and
it
up
has
and
like
up.
thousands of levels, right? And so Coruscant is where the main Jedi temple is. It's where the headquarters for the Galactic Republic and the Jedi, they're all on Coruscant. And it's a planet we go back to in a lot of different shows. And depending on where you are in the timeline, you can see how built up or how much certain parts of like the Jedi temple or the Senate, how they have changed over time. And to take it, but we've never gone this far back in time, right? So to see it in newer stages, I think is really fun.
Totally agree. Okay, we need to talk about Master Soul. Okay.
Oh my God.
Just the best. Just the best character. I love him so much. He's immediately just like, I want to give him a big hug.
Right?
He's just the best. I think his performance, I think he said, was inspired by Qui-Gon in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
And I feel like he's like a much more lovable Qui-Gon. And
Yeah.
I'm so here for it.
I'm fully obsessed with Master Soul. Jung-Jae did such a good job portraying his character, and I think you can really see the inner workings of this character because we've been talking about different narratives and perspectives, and I think there's still a lot of questions about what happened on Brendok during the fire, right? And does Soul feel guilty about what happened? We know he blames himself for what happened with May. It's something he's made peace with. Has he really made peace with it? Has he also really made peace with Osha leaving the Jedi Order? I don't know. I think these are still questions that we have. Perhaps questions he himself still has of if he has actually come to terms with it. But the scene of him where he reconnects with Osha and he says her name and he says, "I believe you," and he smiles down at her. I was like, wow, this, I don't know. I felt like he was talking to me. And I was like, Soul believes me. Everything's going to be okay. I am in good hands, you know? And I loved his conversation with Osha as well about, you know, when he's going to go confront May, of trust in May and trust in me. And there's something really earnest about Master Soul, I think. Like, Torben says, right, to May, we thought we were doing the right thing. And I think that's something Soul would say too, you know, once we figure out what actually happened back then. But I think that Soul really is trying to do the right thing in every situation. But he's still, in some ways, it kind of feels like he's still kind of like Obi-Wan, where he's really operating within the Jedi Council and he's kind of pushing at the envelope a little bit. Like he really pushes to make sure that he's the one that goes to find Osha in episode 1. And Vernestra is the one who is like, no, I'd rather you stay here. You're more valuable at the temple. And Soul kind of pushes back against that some. But then at the end of episode 2, right, Vernestra is telling him, we're going to have a discussion about this. We're going to have a meeting. And Soul is like, no, I don't want to have a meeting. I want to keep going after Osha or after May. And Vernestra shuts it down and Soul doesn't push back against it. You know, so he's still falling in line with what the Jedi Council say at this point. And I wonder how that will change throughout the episodes, if it will change. Because to me, that feels very much like an Obi-Wan way of going about things. But whereas Qui-Gon Jinn, I think, would push those boundaries a little more, ask for forgiveness, not permission. We definitely see that with Anakin later on as well, you know? So I think Soul is kind of in the middle right now between Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon. So it'll be really fun to see how that develops and kind of where his character goes. Again, if we're thinking big picture here, that the perspective of the Jedi will change, or the Jedi's perspective of themselves will change, will that become really personal for Soul here, depending on what happens with May and Osha?
I wonder too. I mean, I think it's sort of clear to me that Soul has a lot of affection for Osha. I mean, even just Jecki, his Padawan, walking up on him, looking at the holograms, and the fact that Jecki even questions that. And I think that was a really great scene, and I like that. But it is interesting to me that to me, it's clear that Sol has an attachment for
Yeah.
Osha, but like, what is that? Is that a piece of guilt? Is that a piece of, is it a
Like a
a
love.
fondness, a regret? Like, what are we dealing with here? Maybe it's all of those things at once. It's a very complicated situation, which I think it is. We learned that almost immediately after meeting Master Sol, right?
Mm-hmm.
I also think it should be noted that Master Sol's name is Sol, aka sun. So everything revolves around the sun, right? So I think in a lot of ways, the narrative and perhaps our tragedy of the twins also could potentially revolve around Sol and some of Sol's own decisions. I think we get hints of that here and there, but I think that it feels like a very obvious name that we needed to talk about a little bit, about the fact
Mm-hmm.
that his name means Sol. I mean, I think he's really warm and loving, like a son, right? But I think there's also this idea of everything revolves around the sun. So does everything revolve in the story wise around Sol?
Yeah, and perhaps his decisions in the past, and then his decisions now in the present.
No, too.
Yeah. Before we move on from this section, kind of coming to the Jedi Temple, the training session with all the kids, adorable, loved it.
Great.
I
Mm-hmm.
loved it. When they were talking about the Force, the kid who sees fire, I just want to talk. I
don't think there's anything really wrong with that. I think we're supposed to be like, oh, that's kind of rough.
Ouch.
But I think something that we learn in the books for the High Republic is that each of the Jedi during this time period sees the Force differently. Some see it as a song, some see it as the ocean. And here we have an example of a kid who sees the Force as a fire spreading around, and fire is violent, right? But it is also rebirth and renewal. So it's not, I think it sort of fully represents these dualities that we see in the title almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I love that they included that, because Sol in his lesson is talking about, picturing it as an ocean. And I think it's easy to look at the ocean as a positive connotation, but the ocean is just as powerful and dangerous, and perhaps holds a lot more secrets, honestly, than a fire. A fire is very in your face. You know what it's going to do. But the depths of the ocean, honestly, very scary. You know what I mean? But I think sometimes they're presented as, the water puts out the fire. The water saves you. You can swim in the ocean. It's peaceful, yada, yada, yada. Anyway, but I liked this discussion about both the fire and the ocean in regards to the Force in this scene. And I loved too how Sol didn't really react. Again, to your point, like, both people experience the Force in different ways, and that's a big hallmark of the High Republic series that they talk about with their characters. And so to see Sol just kind of accept this view of the Force in relation to fire and talk about respecting that power of the Force, I thought it was great. I can very easily see the Jedi in the prequel era being like, well, gotta keep an eye on that kid, like, things aren't looking good, you know what I mean, to immediately kind of associate it with something bad. Whereas Sol, I think, has a little bit of a different approach here, which I thought was great. And I liked that it was just time for them to all go to lunch, and they just kind of filed out, and it
was very cute.
It was very cute.
I think that another layer to the kid seeing fire and then Sol saying ocean is interesting, because the planet in which Osha lost her family on, we learn that Osha lost her family to a fire. So I think, I don't know, maybe like using the word trigger is not the right word, but like I think Sol is involved in all of this,
it's kind of we're supposed to be thinking of fire as the audience, so it's also going to come up here in this moment with Sol.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't really know what to think about that, but I thought that was interesting.
I agree. We do get in this sequence as well about, what we were talking about with Sol kind of wanting to be the one to go out and get Osha, and Vernestra saying no. We get this other little clue about just how intertwined the Jedi and the politicians of the Galactic Republic are intertwined at this point, where Vernestra says, if it were to become public that a former Jedi killed one of our own, And Sol finishes saying, our political enemies could use it against us. The fact that the Jedi have political enemies is kind of a red flag when we're thinking about the ethos of the Jedi in general. And then Vernestra goes on to say, discretion is important, our justice swift, and an example made. Despite your feelings for this girl, do I have your support for this endeavor? And Sol, again, keeping in with the good Jedi, says, of course, Master Vernestra. And I thought this was a great inclusion, especially for fans of the High Republic and like Star Wars fans in general who are tracking with, the rise and fall of the Jedi Order, to include this about, the Jedi's political enemies and how they want to make an example out of this and make sure that they get it done quickly so that the galaxy's perception of the Jedi reputation is not impacted by this event, which is, again, kind of what we see the Jedi doing with Ahsoka when she's put on trial for murder as well, 100 years or whatever later. So anyway.
It's not a Skytalkers episode if we're not referencing Ahsoka's story in some way. It's just the Reylo comes up, Ahsoka comes. It's just that's where we are. We're here. Okay, I'm with you.
Yeah.
I got to talk about Yord. I got to talk about Jecki. I got to talk about Yord. Okay.
Yord.
We've already talked about Yord.
No, we haven't.
Yes, we did. We already talked about Yord a little bit in his like conversation with Osha and everything.
Yeah.
So we've already introduced the podcast to Yord, right? But we haven't discussed the comedic genius that is Yord. I think it's hilarious to have this like uptight Cyril type character from Andor in the Acolyte. Like Yord is such a rule follower by the book. It's the fact that he's ironing his Jedi robes or steaming his Jedi robes. He's half naked. We are immediately with that vulnerability there, but like it is so funny with Jecki, who is just sort of like, Yord, put your clothes on.
I like when Sol asks, what's wrong with Yord? And Jecki goes, nothing. He's Yord.
He's Yord. Also, Yord is just potentially, Caitlin and I have said this, and I say this with all love, okay? Maybe the worst Star Wars name possible.
But it's so fitting.
But it is very much so fitting, yes. When I first heard it, knowing nothing about this character, I'm like, that's going to be a fun one to talk about on the podcast. Because it's just like not a great name, but it is so perfect. Yes, I am part of the Yord Horde. As you might have seen online, I think I just got a notification that Star Wars tweeted #Yord Horde.
Yeah,
I love that for us. I'm very happy that we're here. I think it's funny that it's Sol, it's Jecki, and Yord is coming.
And Yord.
Like Yord doesn't bring his Padawan. Like forget about her. So Yord is here. And then later in episode 2, when Yord proposes this like grand plan. And then Jecki's like, no, that's not what we're going to do. We're going to do the easier one.
The thing is, Jecki doesn't even say no. She just goes, well, here's what I would do. And Sol goes, yeah, all right, we'll go with your plan. And you just see Yord is all the way in the back of the scene and his face just falls like, what?
You have to feel so bad for him because he's just like, wait, what? Like, it's very Obi-Wan following the books in a lot of ways.
But Obi-Wan's plans get picked. Yord's do not.
True. True.
Okay, but I loved his posture, right? When he's waiting.
He's actually great. The thing is, he's great.
No, he's fantastic. When he's waiting in Osha's bunk, at the beginning of episode 1, and he's ramrod straight, and his robes are flared out behind him, and when he stands up, and he adjusts everything immaculately, it's perfection. I gotta say, also, too.
We're gonna say the same thing.
A ship?
Yeah. So there has to be some sort of history between him and Osha. There was already some awkward tension there when they saw each other again for the first time. Osha was so excited to see him and he was like nervous, adjusting his clothing, which we know now is a attribute of Yord just in general. A Yordism, yeah. But at the same time, it felt specific. So maybe when they were Padawans, I don't know, that's a very High Republic thing, by the way. If you're unfamiliar, that era, there's always a lot of flirtation happening between the Padawans.
Well, he says, is it, I can't remember if he says it or Osha says it, but one of them says, I never thought I'd see you again. But I think
it's Osha.
It's very low. It's like a little, like, wow, you're here. It's great to see you. I don't know. I could get behind it. I'm behind it right now. So it doesn't take much for us to jump on a ship. So
No. Mm-mm. No, but I'm here for it. I think that was an interesting piece of history.
Mhm.
Another pull at the past. I wonder what we're going to learn there. But
Well, I think the other thing about this potential ship or just their relationship, like not romantic, but just as Padawans, is that we find out later that Yord does not know that Osha had a twin. And he's very surprised to learn this, kind of in a way that feels like I knew everything about her and I didn't know this. Why didn't she tell me this? I was her closest confidant, her best friend. We were in love with each other, whatever it is, right? He seems very surprised and a little taken aback that he didn't know about May. The other interesting piece is that the Jedi Council did not know about May either. Jecki points out that it wasn't in Osha's file that she had a
mhm.
twin. I think everyone knows that she had a sister, but the idea that it was a twin seems like a much bigger deal to everyone,
Yeah.
which I think, as we know in Star Wars, twins are a big deal. So
Yeah.
it's very interesting that when Osha was brought back to the Jedi to, be trained as a Jedi by Indara, Sol, Torben, and Kalneka, that they did not indicate that the sister that Osha lost was a twin.
Yeah, I think we learned that Sol was posted on Brendok, which was May and Osha's home planet at that point, right? And if Sol insists that May is dead because he says that he saw her die, and then that wasn't included in the file, that is suspicious to me. I'm not going to lie. If there was not reported at all to the Jedi and Sol it felt like there was like concrete evidence that May was dead because he saw it, makes it just and then it was not included. I feel like it's a little suspicious. Something
Mhm.
weird went down in whatever happened with that.
Yeah, very much so. All right, but let's talk about the end of episode 1 because I'm actually kind of surprised we haven't gotten here because this
Mhm.
is the other piece of the weird force stuff, I think, in this episode is when May goes to her master and they're at the beach. They're not even talking close to each other. We don't see that happen yet. And the master says, "The Jedi live in a dream they believe everyone shares. If you attack a Jedi with a weapon, you will fail. Steel or laser are no threat to them, but an acolyte kills without a weapon. An acolyte kills the dream." I, th- there's a lot to unpack here. I have a lot of questions about this whole little mission statement from
Mhm.
the master about what exactly is an acolyte because we hear May talk about this later in episode 2 about killing without a weapon, but she's using knives, which are presumably made of steel. She
Mhm.
has Torben take the poison himself, so I guess she's not really.
But she was struggling with that, right? Like
She
didn't
was, but
she was sort of struggling to even complete the whole mission, as it were, and was sort of behind the back of her master, we suppose, could be Qimir, who knows, was trying to kind of find a quicker way around it by using the poison that is from her home planet, right?
well, yes, correct. But one of the interesting things that May says when she's talking to Qimir is she says, "I have 2 Jedi to kill after Torben, and I will kill one of them without a weapon and please the master." And I'm like,
Mhm.
"Why one? Is there a limit? Do we just have to do
Well, I
one?"
think it's because it's hard.
Is it so
Really
is it
hard
like
to
if
do
she
that.
kills at least one, she levels up
The acolyte?
perhaps? Yeah, she becomes the
Yeah.
actual acolyte. So
Well, let's talk about what an acolyte actually is,
mhm.
right? An acolyte, I think, in the Star Wars world, is someone below the trainee, right? It's not a master, it's not the Padawan, it's not this rule of 2 Sith thing. It's someone who is below that. And if there is a rule of 2 with the Sith, if we're gonna say that this guy who said this quote, right, is a Sith, okay?
Mhm.
And we know about the rule of 2, always 2, there are no more, no less, okay? That it just can't be true, right? There's not always going to be just 2 because they have to have someone to take over the point of master and then have an apprentice,
Well,
right?
and we know
So
the Sith, there used to be a lot of Sith. a long time
Yes.
ago, like in
Yes.
ancient Star Wars time.
Yes.
And that's been explored or talked about in canon. So we could just be at a different time period. I don't know. I think it's a good question of if these actually are Sith. But I think to your point, like if we're for argument's sake, we're going to say it's a Sith, then what does this term acolyte really mean in regards to someone like May?
Yeah. And I think she is wanting to be part of that duality that comes with the master and the apprentice with the Sith. And I think she's probably, the guy who's speaking is probably the apprentice and not necessarily the master. I think there's someone above this guy with a lightsaber that we see at the end of this episode. I could be wrong about that. Who's to say? But I think she's trying to find her way into a duality, which is kind of interesting given the fact that she's already part of a duality as a twin.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I genuinely don't know how to analyze this quote just yet. I want to put a pin in it and kind of talk about it throughout the entire series. But an acolyte kills without a weapon. The acolyte kills the dream. And I think that obviously the Jedi live in a dream they believe everyone shares. If you attack a Jedi with a weapon, you will fail. I just think it's interesting, the concept of the Jedi live in a dream, their perfect world in this high republic where they're just everywhere across the galaxy. I think it sort of is worth interrogating, and that's kind of what these people, I think, are going to do in terms of like a philosophy.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see once we learn more about May and this master and their master potentially, and the whole, however many people are on that quote unquote side, about what their philosophy of the galaxy should be. Because I think there is truth in this idea that the Jedi, they think everything is fine as long as you stick with what they're saying to do. You know what I mean? It's that, like, I think the Jedi definitely fall victim to that mentality sometimes, that they are the keepers of peace. Therefore, they're also the keepers of morality too, which can be a very sticky situation, especially when they're so closely tied to politicians,
and the keepers of the Force
are
too.
not good keepers of morality.
Yes, exactly. So,
but
very interesting.
Yeah.
Do you want to say what you're going to say about the voice? Like, what do we think about the voice?
I don't know. Okay, look, if you followed our Bad Batch coverage, you know that let me start over. Usually in Star Wars, Charlotte and I do not speculate about masked people, right? These masked side characters, we do not use masked men.
Feels like it, yeah.
It feels weird to say that. Masked men. There have been a couple of them throughout different Star Wars projects and stories, and we have usually opted not to make them a huge part of our conversation, and that has usually served us pretty darn well. And I've been very happy with that decision. That came to bite us in the butt in the Bad Batch, where we speculated so heavily about one masked man.
Too hard.
Severely clowned about a masked man in the Bad Batch, which, just finished. And in that coverage, I said, I'm not doing it again. I will not be fooled to speculate about another masked man.
Who is under the mask is the question.
And yet here I
Caitlin's
am.
like, I'm not going to do it.
I'm not doing it.
And I think it's fair, but I do. It's.
But I'm interested.
I think we're gonna have to.
I know. That's the thing. The Bad Batch just ended, and I was like, never again. I've drawn my line in the sand. I'm not crossing it. A month later, I'm like, well,
is it Qimir?
is it Osha? Is it Soul? Yeah. Is it someone else?
Oh my god.
I would not be okay if it was Soul. I'd be so sad. But anyway, all that to say, I think we will be speculating some about this masked man, but maybe not as heavily. At least not at this point. Not in episodes 1 and 2.
Yeah. I think the voice, to me, I need a second to get used to it. The first time I heard it, it was a little jarring to me. I think it's supposed to be, by the way. I think it's supposed to be jarring. But it's sometimes, I'm just going to say it kind of sounds to me like a YouTuber type voice changing situation. It's just what it reminded me of, like a gamer YouTuber voiceover. That might be purposeful. I don't know. And I feel like on watch 3, I'm used to it. I'm here for it. But I feel like all voices can't sound like Darth Vader. All voices can't sound like Kylo Ren. Yeah. So I'm here for this very different voice sound. So it was jarring though. And maybe it's good to be uncomfortable sometimes.
Only a little bit.
Only a little bit.
Only a little
Okay,
bit.
should we dive into talking about episode 2, Revenge/Justice?
Yes, I really loved episode 2. I thought that episode 1 was a great introduction to the world, but I think things really start cooking in episode 2, particularly for me, the back half of episode 2. Everything, the tension between May and Torben, I thought their scene was one of the standouts for me of when she gives him the poison. I was shook. I was on the edge of my seat about what was going to happen and what he would do. And then, of course, the fight between Sol and May, I thought was so well choreographed. I loved them being in that kind of arena setting a little bit. Her use of the dirt, when he was able to take all of the knives from her without noticing, I thought was just,
so cool.
It was so cool. And like, he's the master here,
Yeah.
he's the one with the skill and experience. I thought it was really great.
Yeah, I think the show is really well filmed. I have told Caitlin this, I don't think I've talked about it on the podcast, but something that sort of sometimes frustrates me about Star Wars shows is I always feel like we're fixed on one camera angle. And you don't get that at all with the Acolyte, and it's very refreshing. Lots of tracking shots, lots of zooms, lots of different angles than just straight on.
Yeah, but the opposite of that is with the fight scenes, you get more
Yes.
time to really
I know what's happening in the fight.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think there's been a lot of talk, I think, online in the online spaces about the way action scenes are filmed and how the sort of quote unquote lazy way to create tension and drama is to add like a ton of cuts in editing.
Yeah.
And we don't have that here because we know what's going on, and it's great. And I think that arena situation was great. I loved the shot of just the dirt and wondering what she's going to do with the dirt. And then she did the thing, which is kind of blind them with the sandstorm.
Yeah.
And I thought that was great. I was really tracking with what was happening, which is just sort of a little bit of a lost art in action choreography. Let's dwell a little bit on the Torben situation. So
good.
Fascinating that we learned that Torben took the bearish vow.
So we find out that Master Torben has taken this thing called the bearish vow, which I think the show does a pretty good job of contextualizing what that is without you actually having to know what it is.
You don't need to know what it is at all. You're just like, oh, he's just in a weird
He's in like eternal meditation. Yeah.
Exactly.
And one of the other Jedi at the temple says, oh, no one's talked to him in 10 years, right? I think you can put the clues together. But if you are curious about what it actually is, which I think is pertinent to the story, truly. The bearish vow was first introduced by Charles Soule in a comic series from 2017, the Darth Vader comic. It's also been discussed within the High Republic series itself. And Charles Soule is one of the authors in the High Republic publishing initiative as well. So it's tied there. But what it is the bearish vow was an oath taken by Jedi who completely refrained from all activities related to the Jedi Order as a form of penitence, disengaging from anything but the Force itself, and committing themselves to gaining ultimate communion with it. It was named after a Jedi named Barish, and the vow was named after her. And this is from Wikipedia, and it says, although most Jedi who swore the vow did so as a method of atonement, some did it in order to refocus themselves on the Force. And that method of atonement, I think, is the good tie here, because clearly something happened as we've been talking about this event on Brendok. We've got these Jedi that we've been told is seeking revenge on. And we have someone here, Torben, who is in this, eternal meditation, more or less, which some have used as a method of atonement. So what is he atoning for? And May's conversation with him here, where she's just standing in front of him, and she says, do you remember me, Master Torben? I know why you took the bearish vow. You thought this life would give you the peace you seek, but your past still haunts you. I offer you a choice. Confess your crime to the Jedi Council or receive the forgiveness you seek right here, right now, from me. And then he opens his eyes again, so shook. And she says, face the past, Master Torben. And he says, I've been waiting for you, May. Forgive me. We thought we were doing the right thing. And then he takes the poison. He kills himself.
He commits suicide. He kills himself.
It's truly.
I was shook to my core.
I don't think Star Wars has ever done something like that on screen. I could be wrong in, a lot of books and stuff. But
probably Clone Wars.
That's true. What am I saying? Clone Wars is super dark. but live action?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know either,
It's
but this
wild.
feels so...
He's obviously feeling so much guilt.
Right?
His entire life since whatever event happened, the guilt has ruined him, and that he felt like he had to take this vow of solitude, meditation,
atonement.
Well, but it's not enough.
I know. And if we go back a couple scenes, but when May is getting the poison from Qimir, and he says, everyone has a weakness. The Jedi justify their galactic dominance in the name of peace. And peace, and May says, is a lie, I know. And he goes on to say, like every Jedi, he only thinks he's found peace. What he needs is something only you can give him. Absolution. I love that word, absolution. I think it's the idea that absolution, forgiveness, which is what May says when she's talking to Master Torben as well, that forgiveness is only being earned through his death, is very dark side, very, very dark, right? And the fact that he does it, that's the choice he ends up making, is just really so wild to me. I thought these scenes between them were incredible. The tension was really there for me. The other thing I really enjoyed, though, is that the conversation between Qimir and May about absolution, when he says, what he needs is something only you can give him, absolution. And he gives May the poison that comes from their home planet. And then the next scene is between Osha and Sol, talking about Sol feeling responsible for what happened that night on Brendok. And in that scene, Osha is the one giving Sol absolution. She is absolving him from feeling guilty about what happened that night. And again, that duality I thought was just so well done. And for May, Torben's absolution came from his death that was given to him by May in the poison. Whereas Osha freely gives it to Sol in these instances where they're talking about it on the ship. And I thought that was great. And who's to say if we will not look at these scenes differently in the future, given all of the question marks we've discussed about Osha thus far. But at face value, taking it as face value at this moment in these two scenes, I thought the parallels between these moments of absolution between each of these twins and each of these masters was so cool. Honestly, I thought it was really cool.
Well, okay, so the next we learned that the next Jedi that May wants to kill is the Wookiee Jedi, who we know to be Kelnaka, right?
Yeah.
And we learn this entire episode ends with seeing Kelnaka, and clearly it's a different Kelnaka that was in the marketing because Kelnaka's gone a little rogue. The Wookiee has no clothes, and he is a little like monsterish.
Crash landed, it doesn't look like that ship is going anywhere.
And he's clearly in a place that's very hard to find. And it's just feels like all these Jedi have like something to be guilty for, right? Well, and so when we're flashing back, or not flashing back, sorry. When you talk about this duality, then again with Osha consoling Sol, it's like all these other Jedi might feel a little bit of guilt, right, for something that happened. And to some, it has driven them a little crazy, like perhaps with Kelnaka and clearly with Master Torben too, and to take this like vow of silence, right? So what's going on with Kelnaka? Like truly what the heck happened? And then why is Sol like kind of okay with all of it if he was there too?
That was what I was going to say too. I'm like, okay, if we have 4 Jedi that May wants to kill, Sol, Kelnaka, Indara, and Torben. Sol and Indara, they were still with the Jedi, right? They seem pretty okay, all things considered.
Yeah, pretty adjusted.
Pretty adjusted. They made peace with it. Whereas Torben and Kelnaka, like way off the deep end.
From what we learned, it seems like Kelnaka is off the deep end, off the grid.
Yeah, it's just
really
not doing
different from that.
Not having just really a good time. Yeah, and neither is Torben. So why out of these 4 Jedi
it's suspicious, Caitlin.
I know. It's all suspicious.
Because he's like, oh, it's just grief. Like you just gotta push through it. It's like, okay.
It's not simply grief that would lead Torben to take a eternal vow of atonement. And willingly take poison that he knows will kill him. Like, that's, again, it's very dark. It's very serious. So what happened? What happened, you know?
Yeah, totally. Totally. I don't know. There's a lot of what happened here. This episode in particular, I think we'll look back on episode 1 and think, wow, I see this completely differently. I think episode 2 we might see more differently than 1, especially if we learn more about Qimir's allegiances. Because I think Manny in the marketing called his character literally just a guy. Okay.
So
It's very clear he's not just a guy. Like, he's very, very adept. He knows what to do. He has ideas. He has wisdom. He can dodge Osha pretty well in like the Jedi. So, and the moment he like switches to "you look just like her,"
Oh,
also
so chilling.
really, really sinister.
Yeah.
And it's funny because Manny, if you watch The Good Place, like, he plays like such a dumb guy, and I feel like they're kind of playing into that.
Mhm.
Lovable dumb. I don't want to be rude to his character. I love his character. He's the best. But I think they're playing into the fact that like the audience, if you're familiar with his work, like, love him. You love him, right?
He's a golden
So,
retriever.
He is a golden retriever in The Good Place.
Yeah.
Yes. So I feel like there's a sense of, oh, I immediately trust him because I love his character in The Good Place. Look at his face. He's so cute. He's so attractive. Like, he's so charismatic. Like, oh my
He's got a great
God.
smile.
You know? Yeah, he's just the best. And then, you know, the moment he turns a little bit, you're like, oh, that's creepy. Who is he? And so then you're like, oh, is he the master? Why does he have these moves, right? When he's dodging.
It's a lot. And the fact that he knows where Kalnaka is as well. How did he?
Right. Why does he
know?
care if he's literally
Well,
just a guy?
He's just a guy. He clearly
Hit him with your car. Sorry.
I think that's what he would say too, honestly.
Yeah.
But he knows about the master, right? He knows all of the Jedi that May wants to get revenge on, which I think it's still up for question if the master knows that May wants to get revenge on all of these Jedi, that she wants to kill them, even if she kills them with a weapon, which that's how she killed Indara, right? That it's worth it to her to kill them all, even if it means not in the Acolyte way, if we're kind of going on face value again of that quote from what we know right now. He knows about that. He knows that she has a twin. And he, again, like you were saying, when he recognizes that it's Osha and not May. So I guess there's a world where potentially he could have known, you know, if he's not just a guy, right? That he could have known that Osha was alive this whole time. I don't know. I think there's so many question marks about him as well. And we were talking about this with other people too, but, you know, is he the master? What else does he know? How involved is he? And I think sometimes when we were talking about it, we were like, is it too easy that it's him?
It feels too easy
to be the master.
It feels a little too easy.
But
maybe there's more there that will be revealed that makes it less easy.
Exactly.
Also, just because the audience is able to figure it out doesn't mean it's not satisfying.
Yeah.
When something like that is revealed. I always just want to keep that in mind with regard to like shows like Game of Thrones that change their writing structure based off of people quote unquote guessing.
Yeah, no.
Yes. And that we're not experiencing that here, but just a reminder, like speculation, being right about speculation because you're using the clues that they're putting down, like that's good.
Yeah.
So
we're reading the story. Yeah.
Yeah, we're just literally reading the story.
But I think it's good too that the story, you know, that this is the third time we've watched these episodes, and you know, we started to have questions about Osha, for example, as well, or even the idea that, you know, thinking about our 4 Jedi and how they all responded very differently to this event that happened on Brendok as well. It's a lot to think about, and a lot of things being laid down, a lot of threads that need to be pulled at to figure out this story, which I think will take us back to Brendok and everything that happened there with May and with Osha, honestly, as these twins, this dyad, this pair, which they're not a dyad in the Star Wars sense.
By definition.
Yeah, that we know so far. So just using that as a general descriptor for them, I suppose.
Also, I think just as we're wrapping up here, I think it should be noted that something that surprised me about perhaps the end of this episode and the conversation that May has with Osha is that May is, I think throughout this, has displayed a lot of maybe she's on the wrong path. Like she's really relieved to see Osha being alive.
Mm-hmm.
And if she is the quote unquote dark side twin, there are several occasions in which she doesn't take the shot, you know, and her reaction to seeing Osha really makes me think that maybe May was only on this path because she thought she was dead. And so does this change anything for her going forward? I mean, even from the very beginning of the first scene in episode 1, when she doesn't kill the barkeeper and the barkeeper's child.
Yeah.
I mean, is that a traumatic moment for her? Perhaps. Yes, because her family was probably also killed, right? We learn that later. But she spares them. You know, Sith Lords don't really do that. So
yeah.
I feel like there's already hints of, oh, she might change her path, right? So
if she changes her path, then so could Osha.
Right, because of the balance, and I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. There's a lot to talk about. We'll get into it later,
Yeah.
and when more things are revealed. But I really love the way that we're experimenting with the twin concept. I don't think we've said enough about that on the podcast yet. We have another set of twins, and I love what that sort of means then for the Force and the balance, and how maybe the balance is set out of balance by these two twins, and then it takes two twins to reset the balance later with Luke and Leia. Like, who knows? The twin thing, it's really interesting, and it's fun to explore another set of twins in Star Wars. Like, this is like kind of the first time, right? So the very fact that there's so much Force in this show, right? It's very fun to think about the greater effects on the galaxy.
Yeah, I'm very pumped, and I think the relationship between the two of them is going to be such a great one to watch, because to your point, May, when she sees Osha, clearly looks relieved and, you know, calls her Oshi, this nickname Oshi, whereas Osha has only talked about May in a negative light thus far, even though she's the light side twin, you know, if we're going to put them in those categories, which I think we're kind of supposed to right now, right? If, you know, Osha is the good twin who harbors anger and resentment towards May, even understanding that she thinks she's dead throughout these 2 episodes. Whereas May is the dark side twin who is relieved, and if I could speculate into her emotion, still loves her sister and probably has a lot of sadness throughout her life in thinking that her sister died. And maybe that's what drove her towards revenge, towards justice to these 4 Jedi, you know? So will they swap sides? Will they join sides? Will they stay on their respective paths? A lot to think about, a lot to speculate on. It's going to be very fun.
It's delicious.
Yes, that's the best word for it. It's delicious, and it's literally right up our alley. So, yeah.
Thank you, Leslye.
Thank you,
Everyone
Leslye.
Say thank you, Leslye.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, okay, the last thing I want to say is that Michael Abels' music, amazing.
Oh my gosh.
I love this. I'm a huge fan of his from his soundtracks that he did for Jordan Peele's movies. And just a reminder, those are like horror-y. So just fun that I think that the show might lean a little hard into some episodes about horror. I think I remember Leslye saying there's an Alien episode and then there's a Predator episode. I don't know which ones are what to think about that, but those are scary. So I'm excited that we're gonna maybe see that. I remember that in an interview. But just Michael Abels, I think his music is great. I loved it. I love the credits theme too. It really gets me pumped. Like when each of these episodes ended, I was like, dang, like I'm so happy. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I think his music really it really leans into John Williams, honestly, in a way it feels like we haven't heard in a while. I think especially thinking of like the past couple of shows, like Tales from the Empire, Bad Batch, the Ahsoka show last year. All of those are done by the Qimir family, which are incredible. The end, if we're talking about end credits, the end credit music on Ahsoka is kind of god tier for me. It's so good.
Same.
But that clearly is Kevin Kiner. Like I can, because he's been in Star Wars so long and has been associated with Ahsoka for so long, that's very clearly his musical language in Star Wars. And so I think to now switch to someone like Michael Abels, this feels very much in the like John Williams adjacent in maybe a stronger way than we've seen the past couple of TV shows, and stands out a lot, honestly, even for me compared to like Obi-Wan Kenobi and Andor. And I was thinking about the music a lot while I was watching. So I'm very excited to continue to listen and for when it gets released. I hope they release the music a lot faster for the Acolyte. They did for the Ahsoka show, but that's not always their MO with the music. So I hope that it was successful with the Ahsoka show and that they will also do that with the Acolyte because it's so great.
Totally agree. All right. Great start to the Acolyte.
Yeah.
Can't wait we'll be back next week.
I didn't think we'd have that much derailed speculation, but we kind of did.
In the very beginning, which I'm pretty proud of us.
We're like, we're going to keep it tamped down some. And then we're like, nope, we're on the train.
No, we're not.
Let's go. Before we even talked about Yord, we were like, let's talk speculation.
I could barely keep it in.
I know. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up for us on the premiere of The Acolyte episodes 1 and 2. We hope you guys liked it. We obviously liked it. We will be covering it week to week on Skytalkers. So come back next week where we'll be talking about episode 3. And if you would like to talk to us about your thoughts about The Acolyte, we would love to hear them. You can find us on Twitter, X, at SkytalkersPod, or our personal handles. Charlotte's is at Clarity and mine is at Caitlin Plesher. We also have our Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, website, skytalkers.com. Just search Skytalkers Podcast on whatever social media platform you like, and you will find us there. And if you have a couple of seconds and would like to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, we would really appreciate it. We've had some really lovely reviews the past couple of weeks. So thank you so much if you have done that, taken the time out to rate and review us. We really love reading them. And it's just a nice boost for us personally, honestly, if I can say that. So thank you all if you have done that. And if you would like to share also in real time that you're listening to the show, take a screenshot while you're listening and share it again wherever you like on social media and tag us. We would love to repost and share that as well. And it's a great time too if you would like to join our Patreon and get involved in our Discord. Our Discord is honestly one of the best places to be when a new show is airing because everyone is in that channel, the Acolyte channel on our Discord, talking about their thoughts like as the episode comes out. It's really fun. So if you're interested in being involved at that and other ways to support us, you can head on over to our Patreon and check out our different reward tiers there.
I want to say a huge thank you to these patrons: Joey, Matza, Jackson, Lauren, Kelly, Diana, Susanna, Sarah, Cherie, Katie, Z, Bailey, Thomas, Sam, Stuart, Derek, Swara, Fifi, Suki, Shelby, John, Jacqueline, Debo, John, Daniel, Kyle, Allie, Travis, Ella, Kels, Jennifer, Emma, Savannah, Neil, Sophie, and Blessed Cheesemaker. Thank you so much for supporting us.
Yes, thank you guys so much. And until next time, may the Force be with you.
May the Force be with you.